Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. At 17, Dave Ashley secured a flying scholarship to the RAF, going on to enjoy an 18-year military career as a fighter pilot, flying Harriers and F-18s. He's experienced multiple tours on combat operations, broken his back ejecting mid-flight across the desert, transitioned from pilot to flight instructor, and made the successful switch to Civvy Street with his business, the Ashley Property Group, that he runs with his wife Heather, specialising in portfolio building, property sourcing, land development and project management. Dave takes us on his journey from a boy with a dream to flying an F-18, the incredible stress of combat, the transition from military to civilian life, the reality of a life turned upside down by a broken back, and the challenge of starting your own business from scratch. What has he learned along the way? Without further ado, let's get into it. So, Dave Ashley.
That's me.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks,
Good to
Lee.
meet you.
Love to meet you too.
I want to start by talking about the RAF. Obviously, as I understand it, you had a scholarship to the RAF at 17, which sounds, sort of boys' own type stuff to become a pilot. So, at what point did you realise actually I want to fly?
My dad was in the military. He was a military pilot, so I was brought up with it really. But I remember I was 13 years old. I was sat in the back of my dad's Cortina. We were on the way to see my grandmother in Halifax, and a Harrier flew over, Harrier GR3 at the time, the mark of it, and it flew over the top of Lady Bower Lake. And I looked and went, I want to do that. And then from 13, that's when I decided I'd want to be a Harrier pilot. So away I went from there, really, and just then started doing a lot of running and studying, and just progressed from there. That was the first time.
And I'd imagine there's a lot of boys and girls who think that will be something that I would love to go do, but many of us would never have either the kind of intellectual capacity or capability, arguably, to reach the standards you would need to reach in order to qualify. Did you sort of study and think, right, okay, I'm going to need to know this? How did it all still start to unravel? Yeah,
I would just obviously study hard at school, and then went to the careers office and said, what do I need to do to get in to do that? And they said, you need this, this, and this. And it's not as much as you might expect, to be honest. So it's not like being an astronaut. And I think the thing to take away from it is that anybody can do it, and you meet all sorts of walks of life, people who are fighter pilots, and if you want to do it, just go for it. And so away you go. Yeah, it's great, really good.
So do you remember the first time you went in a plane?
The first time I went in a plane, my dad took me flying, actually. Yeah, the first time that I went flying was on a passenger airline when I was about 5 years old, and we flew to Minorca, and I was sick. So that was the first time. But after that, I actually started flying. My dad took me flying in a Cessna, which I didn't like either because it was really noisy. So there's a picture of me holding my hands over my ears, which he obviously displayed at my wedding. And this is the fighter pilot when he was like 11 years old or whatever. So yeah, I didn't like it at the time, but then it came on. So yeah, it was good. Decided I was going to join the Air Force, applied for a flying scholarship, which I got when I was 16, did some tests, passed the aptitude test to be a pilot. And they gave me 30 hours flying on a Cessna, which was fabulous because I just learned to drive a car, went to live in Lincoln in the YMCA, which is a bit of a baptism of fire, being 17 years old and living in a very interesting environment for a month. And then learned to fly. It was really good. Got 10 hours solo, so rushing around in a light aeroplane over the summer back in those days around Lincolnshire was great.
So what's the journey as someone who's hasn't spent any time in the military from my own personal? At what point do you you walk in on day one? At what point do you get into an aircraft and say, right, I'm on my own? You're flying. What's the journey?
Well, I initially joined as a navigator because the time I went to join, they took one pilot that year, so they were cutting back on slots. So I was like, I don't really want to do that. I want to be a navigator. I want to be a pilot. My dad was like, no, go and be a navigator. Get out of the house. So off you go, mate. Time to leave. So I went and joined anyway. So day one of you become an officer first. I went to officer training. I was like 19 years old. Day one of that, I was stood at the back going, so where do I cross over to be a pilot? And everyone was like, who's the guy at the back? And I just kept pursuing it. So you do officer training, takes about 6 months. We learn to shoot guns and lead people and all that sort of stuff. And then away I went and did navigator training initially. I just kept shouting, going, where do I cross over? Where do I cross over? Where do I cross over? And did some more tests. And eventually they said, off you go. So it was reasonably unheard of at that time. So I became a tornado navigator and then crossed over to be pilot training a couple of years after that. So yeah, that was the way it worked out for me. It was really good.
So is there can you remember that day, the very first solo flight that you would have undertaken? Even if you're going back to those Cessna days, can you remember how you felt when? Because it's perhaps a daft analogy, but I can remember when I passed my driving test and thought, right, great, here we go. There's a little bit of nerves in there. There's a bit of excitement, but I think also maybe arguably at that age you have that kind of invincibility of youth. Totally. You think you're bulletproof at that age. But do you remember how you felt when that first solo flight?
It was great. It was at Wickenby Airfield in Lincolnshire, and I'd done my 7 trips, and then you get let loose and you go solo, and you just get on with it. Really, you're a little bit nervous because you're on your own, but you've done enough training for that time. And as you say, when you're 17, you're like, get out of the plane. I know what I'm doing before you probably do know what you're doing. So a little bit invincible. It was fabulous. It was really good. You don't do a huge amount, but then we ended up doing navigation cross countries and stuff, which looking back, you're like, I'm not sure I let myself loose in all reality, but no, it's really good. Yeah, fabulous feeling, elation really to get flying on your own at that sort of age. Yeah, it was great.
And how is the transition from navigator to pilot? It's kind of how does that feel? How does it work out?
It was great. I mean, I never wanted to be a navigator, but all due respect to the fellas, and I did the job, and then just kept, as I say, shouting that I want to be a pilot. I went and flew every opportunity I had. I'd fly the fight, because I used to sit in the back of a Tornado, which is a fighter, so I'd get to fly that if it's a 2-sticker. And then I saw a friend who was an instructor, so I went and learned the checks, and she took me flying, and then I got recommendations. So I just kept shouting that I want to do it, and then the transition across, I'd already done some military flying from the back seat and then cross over to the front seat, and away I went. So yeah, it's what I'd always wanted to do. So I was never very happy sat in the back. So no, it was great. And then off we went again. So it was good.
And the thing that strikes me about, or the thought process, the thought that's going through my head is how on earth, as a navigator, I don't dwell on that too much, but as a navigator, how on earth do you even contemplate thinking clearly when you're traveling at such a phenomenal speed? I mean,
it's not as bad as you might expect. You get used to it, so it's not as fast as you think. You're not going like 2,000 miles an hour. I mean, you get pretty quick. Don't get me wrong. Sort of 700 knots, which is sort of about 850 or so miles an hour, or whatever. But you're going quite quick. So, but they train you with what to do. So you are trained for it. They don't just throw you straight in the deep end. So you start off on small aeroplanes, then work your way up. So by the time you get there, you're pretty well prepared for it.
Fantastic. Yeah. So 18 years in the RAF. Which is phenomenal. I mean, what do you feel you learned from the experience?
I learned a lot, really. I mean, I'd always wanted to do it. That's one thing. So getting in was great. Learned some amazing things. Went to some amazing places. Met some amazing people. Just fabulous people from all walks of life. Not just in the Air Force, because obviously we work with the Army and the Navy. As a Harrier pilot, you go on board aircraft carriers, so you get to do some great stuff. And then we were on combat operations, so you get to meet a lot of Army, really interesting, special forces and stuff. And you just realise that the people who do it are just normal people who, but generally have quite an adventurous sense in them and get out and do it. It just makes you realise that you can do, if you put your mind to it, you can do anything you like.
Was it what you thought, or perhaps had imagined it was going to be before you joined?
It was different because my father was in the military during the Cold War. And as soon as I joined, 9/11 struck pretty much as a pilot, and off we went. So we were away all the time, which was fabulous at the time. So when we were at peacetime operations, we'd be in Norway, we'd be in the States, we'd be flying off carriers, we'd be in the Middle East practicing, and then we'd go away and do our tours of duty. And so it was busy, but it was fabulous. Really enjoyed it.
And to your point, post 9/11, clearly the world took a bit of a different, or it felt like, from a civilian perspective, I guess, and I apologise for what clearly is perhaps a slightly naive view, but it felt like the world took a big shift through the noughties. The 90s kind of post, if we go back to 89 and the Berlin Wall coming down and the collapse of the Cold War, and the 90s, there were clearly some, still as is always the case, awful things going on around the world. Yugoslavia springs to mind, but it felt like the world was just sort of settling down a little bit, and then 9/11 comes along and conflict becomes a feature for so many of us in terms of the news cycle, at least. But for you, you're obviously experiencing it on a personal basis. I mean, combat totally. must be a very difficult scenario in which to find yourself.
Yeah, it's very different. Obviously, you go through training, but then when you actually get out and rock and roll, it's the first few times that you're involved in it. It's quite scary, to be honest.
Yeah,
but then that eventually goes away, which affects you a little bit, but obviously you're doing the job to help the guys on the ground in our case. So we were flying, dropping weapons to save their lives, really. And they're a long way from home in a place like Afghanistan. So they needed our support, and we did the best we could for them. So it was great. Very satisfying, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I this is the purpose of it. I admire you greatly. I think it's we're fortunate that there are people like you around to look after people like me. That sounds like a very selfish perspective, but nonetheless, I look at that the work that you guys and girls in the forces do. We're very grateful and very lucky to have you. So
no, thanks. It's a pleasure to do it. To be honest, it was a very, very privileged position to be in. So it was great. I really enjoyed it.
So was there a point at which you thought, okay, after 18 years, this is time to go, time to actually think about doing something different? And what was that point? What was the trigger?
Yeah, I mean, I'd done everything I wanted to do. I want to be a Harrier pilot, so I became a Harrier pilot, and then I wanted to be a weapons instructor, so I became a weapons instructor, which is kind of the, some people would argue, but it's the pinnacle of being a Harrier pilot. You then teach the guys all the weapons stuff. And then from there, I went on exchange, so I went to fly the F-18 in Canada, which was fabulous.
Wow.
So, which is the twin-tail Top Gun 2 aircraft, so went and flew that. I just recently got married, took my pregnant wife out to Canada where it was minus 35, and as we were driving from the airport to Cold Lake, which is where we were living, on the radio came up and 3 people died last night in a snowstorm. She's like, where have you brought me? I'm like, I'm really sorry. But we had an amazing time there. It was really good. Met some amazing people, flew some great planes and just travel around. So that was good. When we had, so Finley, my oldest was born there, and then Harvey was born there as well. So I had 2 kids. So I'd kind of done everything I wanted to do by that stage. And it was like, the next thing will be repeating myself. I don't really want to repeat myself. And I've done a lot of being shot at. And it's a bit irresponsible to keep doing that in my mind anyway, to when I've got little kids. So that was it. So I continued what I was doing, left the military at the point at my, I'd done my time. So I did my to 38, 16 year point, they call it, whichever's the latter. And in my case, it was the age. So I left at my pension point and joined British Aerospace, BAE Systems, and went to Saudi Arabia, basically doing the same job, but no one's shooting at me, teaching people to fly. As an instructor, flying the Hawk, which is the Red Areas aeroplane. So
right,
yeah, out in Tabuk, Saudi Arabia. So we spent 5.5 years there, which was an amazing adventure. People go, Saudi Arabia must have been terrible, but it was fabulous. It was really good, not dangerous.
In what sense?
It was fabulous because it's just a new lifestyle. You live in a little compound, which is a bit in your face, but you can get outside. You can travel to the beach. So we'd go to the beach, to the Red Sea camping. Just our family on a Wednesday night. It used to be Friday night there. They then changed it. And it'd be just us. So myself, my wife, and 2 little babies sat in a tent under the stars on the Red Sea with nobody else because they took no tourists. And the next day, loads of families would come down. We'd have barbecues on the beach. So it was just amazing. The stuff you got to see was really good, So different culture, very, very different culture. But the people are dead friendly, to be honest. So.
And also, you've literally gone from one extreme to the other, minus 35 to plus 35.
Yeah, no, it was dead hot. It was like plus 50 at times, So, but it was a dry heat in that part of the world, and you just learn to live with it, really. A lot of time in the water, as you might expect.
Yeah. So if you go back, why Canada? If we go back to that
Canada. At the time,
what was the appeal of Canada?
Well, there were certain exchanges you could apply for in the military. And that one was flying F-18s in Canada. It's like, well, that'd be fabulous. So I said to Heather,
was the F-18 the appeal, if you like, as well? From a
amazing
professional
yeah, fabulous airplane to fly. Really, really great airplane to fly. So that was part of it, and just the adventure as well of going into a new country to live in. So we were there for 3.5 years, and we nearly stayed. So both the boys have got Canadian passports, and I'm not sure if they'll go back or not. But yeah, it was just great. It's a really adventurous place.
Yeah.
So it really appeals to me. I'm a big outdoorsy person. If I can be outdoors, I'll be outdoors rather than inside. So. Yeah, and it was brilliant.
And even just the landscapes, the environment, the people. I always had that. I've been fortunate. I've been to Canada. That sense of the wide open expanse of it is the thing that struck me. It's just such a. Clearly, being a Brit, in reality we live on a very small island. It's a huge expanse of land with all sorts of different climates and landscapes. It's just. But then I've been to the desert. It's very different. Shifting sands, and you can see landscapes evolve, but it's a very much more uniform sort of feel. It feels as opposed to somewhere like Canada. Must have been a stark contrast when you arrived in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I mean, Canada was amazing. As you say, you can drive for 3 hours down one road, which is straight without moving the steering wheel, can't you? As you've probably found, especially in a place like Alberta, it would take us. We'd pop for 7-hour drive, whereas over here people don't want to drive for more than 10 minutes. So it's a very different feeling, as you say. But no, that was amazing. Yeah, we went from so we left Canada in the May, back to the UK very briefly to do some training. Then out to the Saudi Arabia. I was there for 6 months on my own, and the family came over in the winter. And the winters were fabulous because it was, sort of 25, 30 degrees and blue skies, sunny all the time. So great place for the kids to grow up when they're babies. And then into early school worked out really well. And we were there for 5.5 years, and that was kind of enough. And then we moved back to the UK briefly, where I became an airline pilot, which was an interesting choice for myself. I joined Jet2, a fabulous company, really, really good, great bunch of people. I did my training, quickly realised that it's not what I wanted to do for the future. So,
and why, if you don't mind me asking?
I just was used to rushing around a bit more. So I found sitting in a cockpit for 5 hours, I was quite encased. I don't mind doing it and then getting out. You literally do 5 hours, you do a quick turn, and you fly back for 5 hours. So you do 10 hours sat in a cockpit in one day. It's quite a long time. And I just thought, someone offered me a job back out doing what I used to do. I thought, thank you very much, Jet2, fabulous company. Paid back the bond for learning to fly the 737 and just moved on from there. So yeah, gave it a go. Did a winter and a summer, and then saw it all and thought, thanks, but that's not for me.
It's interesting. I have a pal of mine who is a commercial pilot, flies A380s, I think now, if I remember rightly. But I always remember him telling me that 90% of the time, he said it's a relatively dull job because you're just pointing it in the right direction and off you go. Kind of technology takes care of things. Yeah. You need to know what you're doing in the event that anything were to go wrong. Yeah. Then the adrenaline starts to kick in and things move pretty fast. But most of the time, technology is such that wonderful inventions, they just pretty much take care of themselves. I would imagine that was distinctly different from flying an F-18, where you are flying. Clearly the technology is massively advanced, but you are flying it as opposed to, respectfully, in my friend's case, pointing it in the right direction were his term.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I went from flying some of the best aeroplanes, the Harrier and then the F-18 to the airline. It was amazing. The 737-800, it was brand new. You can auto land and all that sort of stuff. It lands it nearly as good as you can, in some cases better. But as you say, it was just, I found it a bit too mundane, and the lifestyle, I just realised that in 20 years' time, I'd look back and go, there's a big old world out there. Let's go and have another adventure. So we lived in Scotland for a bit and then went out to Doha for 2 years in Qatar, which was great. Doing a similar job.
How was the transition to Civvy Street? Because I've had family in the military. I don't think in particular springs to mind in 20 odd years, similarly to yourself. But I know of people certainly who not necessarily found the transition straightforward. I think it's different. It's a personal situations, personal circumstances. They differ from case to case. But how had you found that? How was the transition to Civvy Street for you?
It was definitely different. Yeah, really interesting how people perceive hardship. I think because some people would say this is really hard work, and I'm like, we don't actually do very much, But each their own. So it is very different. There's some particularly skilled people in both walks of life, to be honest. And obviously, I think you gravitate to people that you like to hang out with. For instance, this morning I did a sunrise swim around Sandbanks with a mate who's still in the military, but so at 5:45 we met and went for a swim, which is great. So it was an interesting transition, and going from the military to Saudi Arabia I became a civilian, but it was the same job with the same people in the same environment. So it was basically a pseudo-military job for 5.5 years, and then becoming to a civilian airline, it was very different. Obviously, customer service is different. You still customer service in Saudi, so it's a different customer. Mm-hmm. So you still give them everything your best, and it was the same on the airline. I think it is different. You're not quite spoon-fed in the civilian world, and I think some people struggle with that in the military because it is get up. There's food that we'll give you if you want, and then it's a very regimented. So I think that in some ways that can be difficult for people to do their own thing, at times.
Do you think? I would imagine, again, maybe not a naive perspective, but I would imagine that that chain of command and that need for discipline that naturally the military has to employ, because if it doesn't, lives depend on it. I don't want to put too fine a point on it. Yeah. Lives depend on it. Whereas, so I guess therefore when there isn't that clearly in a lot of, not in all cases, I guess if you're a flight instructor, clearly without that discipline, again, lives depend on it. But in most walks of civilian life, there isn't that same sense of actually somebody's life, or this is a life or death situation. We're not faced regularly often with those. So how do you, what do you, the military experience that you enjoy, what did it equip you with to make that transition? What do you take from that military experience that you can then apply in the civilian sector?
Yeah, I think trust is a big one. as you said, you're touching on people's lives there are at risk. So, you're helping save other people's lives, and your wingman or your other colleagues, they also save your life at times. And you kind of take that for granted really at the time. But it makes you pretty trustworthy. So, and part of what we do in the company is, we'll do what we say. So, and we'll be on time, and we'll do everything the correct way, and we'll be transparent and all that sort of stuff. So I think trust is a big thing, especially when you're dealing with, people are investing into the company for you to help them give them a return. So the trust is a big thing. I mean, determination as well, the military give you. So trust, determination, courage, I think is one. So, and it's a big leap to leave the military and set up a company and then start paying yourself. I found that. Yeah. I still find that at times, very different. But the military definitely equips you with that and the courage. We'd go take X jets to a new place and set up in the middle of nowhere, go, and you're like, okay, and you're in charge of setting that bit up. So you're on the advance party, and then the boss and the rest of the squadron will follow behind you. So you go to a certain location with like 2 or 3 people, and you set up for combat operations within a short space of time in a new land with a lot of new people. So it makes you quite sociable, get to meet people. And I like meeting new people all the time, so that's really good. So that really helps. And I suppose just getting on with it really. The Marines, they say, be cheerful in the sort of face of adversity is one of their big things, not RAF
which
thing.
Can't be easy at times.
No, but it helps because obviously if people start moaning all the time, you just no one likes people who just mank all the time, do they? So
no,
you just get on with it really. And as a mate of mine said, no one lost an eye, so just keep moving forwards and enjoy it really.
Yeah, I think that I've always wondered, is it a uniquely British thing? You would probably be better placed to comment on this than me, if only because you've seen more of the world and engaged with a wider range of nationalities and cultures. But I've always thought that that we have this Britishness of sort of laughing in the face of adversity, don't we? We do apply some of the darkest humour oftentimes to the most adverse of circumstances. I guess that would be an asset in a situation such as that. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, no, it is definitely an asset that you just, as you say, sense of humour. When stuff's going wrong, you just smile and it'll be all right. Yeah, and then just move forward really.
So that courage, you mentioned there your own business, Ashley Property Group. So I guess for anybody that's, if I look at the times in which we find ourselves now, I was struck by a statistic I'd read the other day. Think of people taking that leap to launch their own business. There had been 85,000 new businesses registered, online businesses registered in the UK in the last 4 months, which I thought, that's a phenomenal number. And that would be everything from those people who perhaps are, as a bit of a side hustle, are selling, they've got a shop on eBay or whatever it might be, and they're selling a bit of kit from home, right the way through to people who are trying to be the next big thing in tech. So there's clearly technology has been a great leveler and affords an opportunity to launch a business these days in a way that 20 years ago, in terms of, if you look at the differences in seed capital required, it'd be starkly different. Clearly never easy, though. That being said, it's possibly more cost effective to launch today. It's never easy to make it succeed. Do you think that the courage that you gained from your military experience and those other things to which you've alluded set you up for everything that was going to be in front of you when it came to running your own business? I guess what's the story? What's the background to Ashley Property Group?
I think it definitely helps, but I've always been quite a driven person myself anyway. I went from being a door-to-door salesman initially, doing my A-levels, to then military, and then worked my way through that to get where I wanted to be eventually. So just keep trying is the main thing. Just keep going at it. But so for Ashley Property Group, I went from Jet 2 to Doha, flying military aircraft out of there, instructing again, and I had an accident, hurt my back, popped a disc out of my back, which hurt like I couldn't. And I was like, man, that's not so good. Maybe I can't keep flying the ejection seat aeroplanes forever. So what can I do? Well, moving around in the military, we'd bought houses as we went and just kept them and rented them out. So well, that's kind of free income and pretty easy to do, to be honest. So I looked into it, found a mentor, did some training, joined some groups, did some more training, and then that's the way it started to build up. I was still working in Doha at the time, building up the company, Ashley Property Group, and then it started going well. I thought, this is pretty good. So I was literally a year into that, and we were building it up, got some great joint ventures with people. We were flipping houses. We've got clients, global clients from Canada through to Japan, down to South Africa and New Zealand. Because of being overseas, we've got the expat edge to it, which is great. And then I ejected, broke my back, nearly lost my eye, got all smashed up. And then, probably quite fortunate that I'd set the company up by this stage. So we now are full-time in the company. and it's going well. So that's really, in a nutshell, the background to Ashley Property Group. And we've gone from just myself to there's now 4 of us, which is great, and we're expanding as we go. So yeah, it's great.
Fantastic. So I want to just step back a little bit there, if we may. If you mentioned it was one of the things I wanted to discuss with you. I'd read of the accident that you'd suffered.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no comprehension what it must feel like to have to eject from an aircraft. Tell me a bit. I mean, what happened? What are your memories of it? Have you memories of it?
Yeah, I remember it all. Unfortunately, because the main thing was it hurt a lot.
I can't even begin to imagine.
Yeah, so it went all from very calm to mid-air, lost the wingtip. Aeroplane went from totally normal to out of control very, very quickly. So full right aileron, aeroplane's not recovering, centralised, full right aileron. So about 4 seconds, I reckon, if that, and then time to go. So called eject, pulled the handle. And I remember thinking, people always say, when you pull the handle, there's a delay. And then that delay, you think it hasn't worked. So you look down and then bam, it goes. And then it really hurts your back. So I thought, don't do that. In the split second I had between thinking I'm going to go, pull the handle, and then it just, there was no delay at all. It went off because it's quite a new seat, and went through the roof. It all goes dark due to the blood leaving your eyes. So I couldn't see anything, but spinny, just a massive crack in the back. So, sort of mid-40s guy, the 21-year-old guy in the front was absolutely fine, made of rubber, broke my back, shattered the L1, mask came off in the airflow, visor came off, something smashed me in the eye, shattered my eye socket. So it went from all calm to about 4 seconds later I'm in a parachute over the desert with a broken back, and I thought I'd lost my right eye at the time. So yeah, and burning aeroplanes and bits falling out of the sky, but I was lucky to be alive, to be honest. So the seat does a great job. Obviously the aeroplane was spinning in a spiral dive, wildly out of control, and came out at a weird angle, which I'm not sure if I hit a bit of the plane or whatever smashed me in the face, but it hurt quite a lot. But so I was a little bit dazed, but I remember it all. A lot of spinning and a lot of pain was how it felt.
What was going through your mind at that point? If you've ejected the parachute, I guess you got to deploy your parachute as well.
It comes automatically.
Right. Okay. So you've ejected. What's going through your mind? You're hanging however many thousand feet at that point up, sailing, drifting down into the desert in all sorts of, unimaginable pain.
Yeah, it was pretty painful. I mean, the first thing was what happened there. How did that happen? And then the next one was my boots are falling off. So my boots nearly came off. So, and then with a broken back in a parachute, trying to I pulled my boots back on, but that was pretty painful because obviously for the parachute landing. So that was the first thing. Go through my drills, and then looking for parachutes just to see that the other fellas had all got out, and that was all good. That was the main thing. And then it was a long journey down from 10,000 feet in a parachute, and pretty glad to be alive, but just wondering why that had happened, and then what the next thing was going to be. And oh dear, my back hurts, but I can still feel my toes was the most important thing. So yeah, it was like, that really hurts. My right eye, I think I've lost my right eye because I couldn't feel it. I thought it'd come out, but it wasn't out. So it was just all dark. And I thought, oh well, I'll get a nice eye patch one day. And then preparing for the landing. So,
which must have been of itself.
It was ridiculous. Yeah, like, come on, fellas, put a bigger parachute in. It's the 21st century. Because I've done a bit of parachuting in the past with squares. I don't know if you've done the same. But if you're square parachuting, you land really softly. If you've done any parachuting before,
I've done one tandem dive,
right.
which was exhilarating. It has not even the remotest comparison to what you're describing.
No, I mean, sport parachuting is great fun, isn't it? But the landing itself is very gentle, or relatively gentle. Whereas the parachute's quite small. So I was preparing for the landing. I used to be a combat survivor rescue instructor, so I used to teach all this sort of stuff. And here I am about to impact the desert at high speed, knowing it's going to hurt because everyone says it hurts because they put a small chute in the seat. But the impact is really fast, like really, really fast. It was slightly surprising, even though I knew I was expecting it. But about the only building for miles around, there's this farm in the desert, and I was literally drifting backwards towards this farm. Line of sight, obviously it wasn't moving. I'm going to hit that farm, so I'm with a broken back, having to steer the parachute, which is literally pulled down on the webbing to turn it, which then hurt my back quite a lot. But I managed to avoid this building and then getting ready for the impact, and it hit the ground really hard. Yeah, hit the ground really hard. I thought I broke my ankle on my hip doing the parachute roll onto like hard rocky desert floor. It wasn't like the nice flowing sand, unfortunately, but I lived, so it was all fine. But I would not have been doing a lot of escape and evasion after that, I don't think.
So I guess to your point, you'd been an instructor, so you in theory would have known what to do. I would imagine when you're under that level of stress, pain, confusion, possibly all of the emotions that are running through your mind, to have that clarity to come back to, right, so I know what I need to do. I know how to get through this. That in itself must, or is it, for want of a better phrase, almost autopilot kicks in and away you go.
Well, yeah, and also what else you got to do at that time? To be honest, it's just make the best of a bad job in it, and that's what I did. But so lying on the ground in the desert, checked my eye was still there, which was still in, and then couldn't see out of that for quite a long time. And then the farmer, whose farm I nearly crashed into it in my parachute, he came over. Salam alaikum, alaikum salam. Big phone out. People arrived in cars. I'm like, please don't move me because my back really hurts. My ankle, my hip was the worst actually.
Was it?
My hip hurt more than anything. And then the helicopter arrived. Paramedic jumped out. Can't have any pain relief. I was like, oh please, like, no pain relief because you might have a neck injury and all that sort of stuff. So that was reasonably painful. Trip to the hospital and that was it really. And then just recovered. So that was just over a year ago. Bust the L1, fractured eye socket, issues with the right eye. That's still a bit blurry, but it's a lot better. But I was training for a half Ironman at that time, so I was quite fit before, and I think that really helped the recovery. So straight back in the swimming pool. Like 2 days after, I was walked 20 feet, then 40 feet every day, then just slowly built my way back up. But it's taken a long time to get back to near normality. So, but I can't grumble. I'm still here, so it's all good.
And you look in great shape. You look very, very fit. I mean, how much? Talk to me about the recovery. What was the? Yeah, what was the recovery like?
Well, I was in hospital for not very long. They said, "Does your back hurt?" And I kind of stretched the truth and said, "No, it's fine." So they let me go home because either lie in a hospital bed or lie in my own bed. So I was straight back to my own bed with the family, which was cool. And then, just getting in the pool as soon as I could really helped to get back swimming because obviously it takes the weight off. But walking initially very bad, but slowly built that up. So swimming loads, and then physio, very light running. Back to the UK to lie in bed for a month last summer. And then back out to the Middle East. And then I just slowly built it up really. So swimming and then a bit of running, light jogging, and then eventually back on the cycle. So I'm back cycling now, which is great. And I'm doing the New Forest Triathlon in about 2.5 weeks. And then the Bournemouth Triathlon after that, which is great.
Fantastic. So, congratulations.
No, thanks. It's cool.
Do you think it was, how much of a, if I look back through much of what you've described this morning, the consistent theme that runs through with me is you're a guy that does, you acquire the knowledge, you implement. You're a guy of action, who goes out and makes things happen and does things. Do you remember how? I would imagine there were some dark days lying in your own bed, even if just for a month, for a guy that spent his whole life being very active, to have to force by circumstances to stop must have in itself been not without its challenges.
It was quite hard, but my family are amazing. My wife Heather, she's fabulous, and my boys Finn and Half, they're looking after me, so it was great. And 2 dogs, which is really good as well. So the madness still continued. I still walked down to the beach, so we were just here. So walking down Branksome Chine, I'd get to the beach, and that was me. I couldn't come back, and I'd get ferried back in the car, and it just gradually got better over time. So I had some good support, which really helps out. So that was really good. It was frustrating, but then the good thing, every time I walk down Branksome Chine, on the right there's a graveyard. So I used to see that and go, I'm glad I'm not in there. So, I'd slowly think, well, I can't really whinge because I'm still here, and it didn't seem like it was getting better at the time. It took a long time, but I'll just stick with it because it's better than the alternative.
And is that emotional resilience something that you've always felt was an inherent part of who you are, or is that something you think you've acquired, developed, learnt to strengthen, if you like, over the course of your career?
I think everything that I've been through helps strengthen it, yeah. But I've always been, as you say, if I want to do it, just go and give it a go and try your best, and it generally works out, give it some. As a mate of mine, I was learning to ride dirt bikes in Saudi. He said, if in doubt, just give it some more beans. So, and he was right, and it seems to work in life for most things as well, generally.
And do you think that from a recovery perspective, it sounds somewhat cliche as in my head as I'm thinking about it, but almost literally that one step at a time, one day at a time approach, actually the recognition, life is someone once said to me, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I said, yeah, but it's a marathon oftentimes run at a series of sprints, through that marathon to get you to the end. But it was that, I guess there were those days where you thought, I want to go that just, an extra step today, but that's not sensible. You've got to be patient, I guess, as well, to acknowledge you're playing a long game, and if you're going to make the kind of recovery you've been able to make. Yeah,
I'd always overdo a little bit. My wife telling me off because of who I am. So, until very recently, and I still get sore. I'm very wary of certain bits, no parachute, no bungee jumping were the 2 things, but I can probably get by without those in life, to be honest.
Yeah.
But everything else, pretty much I can do. No trampolining, that sort of stuff. But there we go. So as you say, it is a marathon, but you've got to keep pushing it as much as you can, can't you? Really, I think so. Yeah.
So the triathlon, that's an interesting. Again, this is about a constant desire to achieve and push yourself. That's clearly a consistent theme. Without wishing to get kind of too psychoanalytical, I'm going to say I'm a very amateur psychologist. I'm not even one of those. But where does that stem from? Do you think that desire to constantly push yourself?
I've always liked being outdoors, and it keeps me off the streets, I think. So, this morning I was in the sea at 5:45, and the day before I was cycling the New Forest. I like being the early morning. The sunrise is amazing for me now, and you can get a lot done, and there's no one around, so you can go and do your own thing. You can do a bit of personal development, listen to podcasts, all that sort of stuff. So, but I think I've always been quite a driven guy. I've always been running in the fields at a young age and all that sort of stuff. So I like being outdoors and pushing myself to the next level. And there's always been something I like to do.
Yeah. So so if you look to sources of inspiration, who you admire, who you look up to and think, who are they? Who are those figures through your life that have really inspired you to push yourself to the extent you have?
It was my parents, obviously, massively inspired me at the time. Which was great when I was at home. And my dad was in the military and he was a pilot, and so I looked up to him a lot. My mum used to be a nurse and worked really hard for that. So they really inspired me to work hard, a good ethic. And then away from there, various adventure type people that I look up to, Ralph Fiennes and people like that. And then people who do some amazing outdoor climbing and just these amazing feats. In general, I find those people very inspiring. And then moving into the business world, there's certain people I look up to in those environments who are very driven. And I just think that's amazing. Like people like Elon Musk, absolutely fabulous. Everything he touches turns to gold. People seem to say he's lucky. It's like you make your own luck generally, don't you? So I think people like that are very inspiring. Richard Branson, he gets a bit of bad press at the moment, but generally he's done a lot of good for the world. And those sorts of people, they started off and went, right, I'm just going to go for it. I'll give it some beans, and it seems to have worked out for them pretty well, doesn't it? So, yeah.
I think to your point, they've done a lot of good things for the world. I think that there is you're there to be shot at, aren't you? Pardon the metaphor on the basis of clearly exactly. But I think if you achieve anything in life, you're always going to get some who are going to try and knock you or chop you down. And nobody's perfect. Nobody gets everything right all the time. But exactly. I think those figures to which you refer, I was fortunate to have met Sir Ralph Fiennes very early on in my working life. I interviewed him as a corporate event. A fascinating guy, and one of the most humble people. Actually, was really interested in what it was that I was doing. I had nothing. I've been on a couple of cub hikes. This guy's literally done the most extreme of adventures. I had nothing to offer him that I felt that was even remotely comparable to what he'd achieved. But fascinating figures.
Just the fact that he keeps going in the face of adversity. When he had a massive quadruple, whatever, lots of parts of his heart didn't work, and then he went and did a load of marathons and climbed mountains again. You're like, good on you, man. Most people just go and sit in their chair and not do very much. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So you mentioned personal development there. Are you a voracious reader? You mentioned podcasts. How do you that self development? The one thing that struck me again as I'm talking to you is that in order, even to fly a Harrier, fly an F-18, actually you have to, I would imagine, acquire a huge amount of knowledge. There's a constant learning. Yeah. There is no you tick a box one day, right, I can do this now. It's this constant development that goes through to improve. Has that been do you think that's something that the military has taught you, maybe equipped you with, or that again that's something that's just an inherent part of who you are?
I think there's a bit of both, really. I think inherently the people who go to seek that role in life come from a certain mold, and then the military takes certain type of people in on purpose, and then they obviously train them up in the way they want to achieve the aim is basically what happens. But so it does help equip you along those lines. Yeah, for me, personal development, I try and do it. I generally don't read because I listen to stuff now, so I can do other things at the same time because I'm quite busy with the family and job and phys. So I'll try and get up early and do some phys for a couple of hours before most people get up, and then I'll listen to podcasts while I cycle or run. Obviously, swimming a little bit difficult, but so that's what I'll do. I'll do different types of podcasts, and audiobooks are the ones I like to do at the moment. So yeah, it's great.
And what do you the one that springs to mind is the one book you go back to? You think actually that's the one that really?
There's a couple of really good books that I've read and I go back to and recommend to people. There's one Grant Cardone 10X is a really good book that really helped. There's a guy called Dan Pena. He's very inspirational business type stuff when I was moving into the business world, and He's quite an aggressive guy, but he gets his point across. So those two really spring to mind. And then there's just the, Robert Kiyosaki, that sort of stuff, which is everyone's read, but once you get into it, and it just changes your mindset, or adds to your mindset, I think. And I think the mindset is a lot of it, because it is sometimes seems a big leap of faith. Breathe deeply and move forward, and it'll be fine.
And so how have you found the business journey? Because again, it's back to marathons and sprints. I think that the part of the challenge of the world in which we live today is that there is we live in a world of immediacy of expectation, immediacy of impact, immediacy of results, and I think it strikes me that patience may not perhaps be perceived as a virtue to the extent that once upon a time it was. And therefore, I think anyone that starts out in business, and I think I'm not here today to do down social media, but we kind of have this, people present this perfect image of me and my life and my world. And therefore, I think oftentimes there's that sense of, well, if you go out in business, that's what you can, you could acquire that, whatever it may be, material wealth very, very rapidly. That's rare, from much of what I've seen, it is genuinely a marathon. We only ever read about, Facebook's acquisition of Instagram for £1 billion with 10 guys in a room in a business that's been around for 5 minutes. That's a once in a lifetime. Yeah, totally. That's the moonshot. Most of it, I think is it 4 out of 5 or 3 out of 5 businesses never make it past their 5th year. It's tough to make it succeed. Do you think there's, what have been the highs and lows from a business perspective that you've found over the years?
Starting with the highs, for me, it's all new, really. Very different to what I've done. But then there's a lot of similarities with process being organised. So I set myself a weekly planner, and I'll put in time for personal development. I'll put in time for calls with people, and that's really been helpful. Initially, I didn't have that, and then I've mentors. So I've got 2 mentors, and they're both very, very good. So I speak to them, and I think that's the thing to do. Obviously, moving into this environment, being a fighter pilot, it's kind of some of those people are a bit, I know everything, and you're like, that's probably not the best way of going about business into a new environment. So find someone who's better than you and surround yourself with people who are like-minded / better, and then they can help you move forward. And that's definitely worked, I think, for us. So for myself, and then now us as a company. So that's kind of our ethos, is to, and then, the clients we get in, some people are investing their money into property. And so they want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. Therefore, we do the best trading we can. We joint venture with the right people. We have the right backing. We have the right builders, we have the right solicitors, we have the right accountants, right mortgage brokers, who all do a great job. We've had a variety of those people and got rid of a lot of them along the way because they're not up to standard, And so we just try and do everything to the best ability we can is the way that we do it, which is great.
How did you go about that? So the mentor one's a really interesting one. That's a consistent theme with often people with whom I've engaged. They will place great stock, great value on finding the right mentor, but the emphasis there on finding the right mentor. So there are a lot of people out there. Someone once said to me, "You kiss a lot of frogs before you find the right one."
Yeah.
So what were you looking for? What have you found from that mentor experience, do you think?
I think it's accelerated my journey, and then accountability is key. I think for myself, I think for most people, because if someone is actually looking, you go, yeah, I know I need to do that. But then when someone says, "Have you done it?" and you're like,
You strike me as accountability is consistent throughout what you've seen. You strike me as someone who's hold themselves personally accountable.
I'm terrible, yeah. But yeah. For me, it matters a lot that I get stuff done. I have to achieve every day.
Yeah.
And I think people say that you'll never be satisfied in life. It's like, well, I think that's fine. I think moving from the military to the civilian world and the business world especially, I found people who are very similar to me, that they're not satisfied and they want to keep striving. I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. I found people the same as me at last. There's a lot of people out in the military, but it was just, some people are happy to keep doing that role. As I want to do more. And I remember I'd come back from combat ops and back to peacetime flying was a little bit dull. And I did an amazing sortie where I took off and dropped a bomb and then went to a tanker and then flew low level through the Lake District and then did all the Harrier hovering and came home. And so I'm really bored of that. And I was like, how can you be bored of that? And you just get used to it, so keep striving for more. And anyway, I find that the mentors they're a different league, so they're much further down the journey that I'm taking and will reach. And so tap into their knowledge, and I call them both friends now. So really, really helps.
Is that something you would advise to perhaps anyone thinking of starting out in business, that finding that right mentor can be a huge asset for them?
Totally. Yeah, definitely the way to go. And then I've got my own mentee now, so I'm mentoring other people as well, which is great. So
how are you finding that experience?
It's fantastic. Yeah, it's really, really good. It's very very satisfying, and it's helping them out a lot as well. So helping them in their life as well. So they're achieving a lot more along the lines that they want to, and I'm just passing on some of my knowledge, which is great. So that's really great. Yeah.
And tell me about, so one of the things that intrigued me about your business life was obviously you and your, as I understand it, you and your wife are business partners as well as clearly life partners.
Yeah.
That's always struck me as an interesting scenario, in so much as how you balance that out between what's work, what's home. You know, how do you make that distinction, particularly when you're running your own business? I mean, I think that there are an awful lot of people who are in corporate careers who would struggle to switch off and make that, and I think the way that technology has evolved in particular, it's become increasingly difficult to switch off. We're always available. So therefore, where is the line between the office and home? But then if you combine that, running a family life, family home, business life, all those, it's difficult. Is that something I'd imagine you have to work very hard to try and keep that distinction between work and personal life?
It is difficult, and we do work a lot. We do a lot of work, and obviously because we are relatively new and we're building, but we're building a really strong base, and we are, as I say, we're growing. We're hiring more staff, which is great, and it's really starting to expand. It's fantastic, but it is difficult because you sort of live and breathe it all the time. So we have we're starting to get into, because it does take time, as you say, get into a strict regime of, at these times we will do this, and this. Otherwise, it all becomes one big sort of blob of the whole thing, and you say you never switch off at all, and you have to do that. And as you say, with the I need it now social media, so don't take the phone in that room, and I'll get on with work, and then I'll look at my phone at a certain time of the day. I'll do that 3 times a day. So if people go, you haven't responded to my message, I'm like, mate, well, that's just how life is, dude. I've got other stuff in life apart from talking about your horse picture or whatever, you know what I mean? So, it just takes a bit of discipline, but it is difficult. It is very difficult. We were escaping this weekend, Friday, we were escaping to Bath for a night away from the children and work, etc. So for the first time in a long time. So that'll be great.
Fantastic.
Looking forward to that.
And your wife, she's an MBA as well, doesn't she? She has a business career, so she brings again, different experiences to the party from a business perspective, and I think the fact that combination must make for a really compelling business proposition as well.
Yeah, it's great, and she's got her own business as well, Heather Ashley Health and Fitness. So we've got the 2/3 businesses really, because of the Ashley Property Group, and we've got a sort of a subsidiary business within that as well. So we've got 3 sort of businesses on the go at the same time. So it is busy, but we're now outsourcing more, and that's really helping, and we're growing more. So yeah, she's fantastic, to be honest. So she's into obviously health and fitness, and I've always been into that as well. So we sort of, I'll leap out of bed at 5:15, and she's a bit like, would you please leave me alone? And off I'll go, and then come back, and she'll then go and do her stuff. So it seems to work pretty well.
So how do you celebrate success? And I guess I should, if there's one thing that I might have learned through my own business experience, is that perhaps I often felt that when things were going well, there was a tendency to react along the lines of, well, so they should, because I'm working really hard. But I would never stop to pat myself on the back, because I was always concerned that the moment I were to do so would be the moment something would come and bite me on the proverbial pretty hard. But then someone once said to me, but you if you're not celebrating that success, and not in a sustained sense, but actually just to take a moment to reflect and think, actually, you know what, well done, move on. But how do you celebrate success? Do you celebrate success when clearly you're in that constant kind of go kind of?
It's a very good point, and it made me smile a lot by what you just said there, because it really hits home. Yeah, it's difficult to, as you say, it's difficult to celebrate that success, because you feel like, and so bloody should do, as you said.
Yeah.
But we try to, so I'll celebrate I'll give myself a ride in the forest on my bike, so that to me is success, because I'm now doing my own thing rather than driving my car to go and work for somebody else. So that's a success for me, to be honest. And then, as I say, we're escaping. We had our sort of best month last month, so we're going to go away to Bath for a night out, rather than, we were going to go to Mallorca to do some triathlon training. That would have been great, but it's obviously shut down, so we're going to go and have a night away to Bath, which would be great.
Fantastic. So, yeah. Fantastic. And is there any downtime? I mean, obviously you mentioned you some time with your family, with your wife this weekend, but if there were to be any downtime, does that then downtime mean you still got to be doing something? You don't strike me as this kind of guy who's going to be sat on a sun lounger somewhere, enjoying a cold beer and just
really do a lot of that, to be honest. No, I don't watch a lot of television, as you might expect. So I'd rather, for me, downtime is being out doing physical activity. So, which is great.
Fantastic. So what advice would you give anyone who's thinking of starting? We're clearly living through, I don't want to use the phrase unprecedented times, it's been overcooked, but we're clearly living in very challenging times with the pandemic and much of what's going on in the world. I think from even just anecdotally conversations I've had with people that many are turning to, there is that insecurity around the job scenario and what do I do? I've got a business idea. Do I make it happen? How do I make it happen? Where do I start? What advice might you give to someone who's thinking about starting their own business now?
I'd say go for it, but obviously make sure you've got a backup, because everyone says burn the bridge, burn the ships, and all this sort of stuff. And it's easy to say that if you're sat in a position of having made it, because initially it is a big leap of faith. And I would say make sure you do your research before you just launch into it going, I'm going to be the next Elon Musk, because you might quickly not be the next Elon Musk if you haven't done that research and put the hard work in. It's a lot of hard work to achieve the aim. So, but no, definitely go for it. So I'd say get the right education, speak to the right people, get a mentor, and then do a lot of work. But make sure it's something that you enjoy for myself, and then you can then reap the rewards of it, really. So, I mean, it's interesting you say that, because there's obviously, due to the pandemic, a lot of airline pilots are losing their jobs.
Yes.
And so, we're helping, some of our clients are coming to us and we're helping them build property portfolios so they have a secondary income as well, which is a great time to do that, and it's a great thing to do. And then you can work from that as well. And as I say, we're also helping people get into property, so we can help teach that as well if people are interested. But I would say definitely make sure you've got the right mindset, for one, is a biggie. But if in doubt, go for it and just realize that it's going to take a bit of adjustment. So change your mindset, and then that is key, I would say, for most things.
And in terms of what the future looks like, that crystal ball gazing, never easy, but if you were to project forward the next 5 to 10 years, what does the future look like for Dave Ashley?
Dave Ashley and Ashley Property Group, we're just expanding. It's going to grow, and we're doing well, and it's going to get better. And we're going to keep pushing forward. We're going to grow the business. Yeah, we've got some pretty big aims for ourselves, which we're going to achieve. So the next 5 to 10 years is going to be great. Really good. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure you've got a fascinating life, and one that is, I guess, summarised in many ways by constant desire to achieve, and achievement is consistent with that. Throughout, there's clear goals, there's clear ambition. I've no doubt you'll continue to realise that ambition, and I've really appreciated the opportunity to speak with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Lee. It's been fantastic.
Cheers, Dave. Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to today's Extrology podcast. I really appreciate your audience and ears. If you've enjoyed it, then why not hop onto iTunes and give us a review? I'd really appreciate anything that you might have to say. Any feedback, always gratefully received, and look forward to hosting you next time. See you soon. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.